We're on the air.
Okay.
Good morning. It is Sunday, June 2nd. Man, the time has gone by. And I am sitting here with the illustrious Kevin Young, world record holder, Olympic gold medalist. And in the hot seat today, it's Mike Spino. Mike Spino, how are you doing?
I'm doing good, Ian. It's beautiful out here.
Oh, it's beautiful. The sun has been in and out. The humidity is the normal Georgia humidity. But, you know, hey, we live in Georgia. It's always hot, right?
Yeah,
That's right. Especially June, the first few days of June. I'm looking forward to some interesting running and dehydration today.
All right. So right now in the books, it looks like we've got the javelin completed. We also have both men's and women's 400 meters. So
Also some high hurdle races that went on earlier today.
So yes, exactly. So we had both hurdle races. So we are.
Yeah, I was really happy. Lady I coach, she got the #1 time for over 55 in the 400 today. So she broke 71 for the first time. So I'm happy about that.
That's the nation's top time? Or
Yeah, it's the nation's top time.
Wow. What was the time prior to that?
About 71.6 or something like
And
that.
she ran 71.
She ran 70, I think, 0.4 or 5.
Nice.
Yeah.
Nice.
So, really happy about that.
Well, Mike, hey, while you're in the hot seat, and I see that you have a folder in your hand.
Yes.
Let's talk about the clinic that we were going to do earlier. I guess we didn't get enough participation, but I think it's a lot of great information.
Yes.
So what are you doing?
Well, like you said, it's something that people probably don't focus on. I think it'd be interesting to ask Kevin some questions about this, but I have a program called Mind Step, which takes you from the beginning of the season to the end of the season with various phases of mental training connected to the physical training for that aspect.
Now, let me ask you this, Mike. How does this program parallel the physical piece of it?
Yes, it's in the same modules. Like in the build-up, you do something, and the one kind of imagery. It all leads to event rehearsal for your championship. That's where it's all going to, and it starts with just relaxation and focus and concentration. And I'm doing a lot of research with my colleague in Princeton on the brain. Where in the brain the various activities come from, where jump comes from. For other sports also like judo and skiing, we're working on those different aspects. But it's always interesting to hear if you can get it out of these world record holders like Kevin about what went on in their mind and how they prepared for it. And, he ran... Nobody's ever run a 400 meters like he ran. It was just like you watched it, and it was they couldn't believe it.
Do I call you Coach or Dr. Spino? Which one?
Well,
which one do you prefer?
Probably Dr. Spino, because I just got it, and it took me 8 years.
There you go. Well, Dr. Spino, does this applies to both the high school, collegiate, journeyman and women athlete, the wannabe or would-be or elite athlete? How early does this mental preparation start?
I mean, if it starts early with students, like when they're 11 or 12, and that's what we're working with national federations about, then it's just part of their training. They're not considering they don't do the mental training.
Input output, like in technology.
Yes, absolutely.
It's strange because what you're doing now, you kind of putting it in a can, or you have a syllabus for it for those collegiates out there.
Yes,
it has taken most elite level athletes in all type of sports to really learn this sort of thing over a range of 5, 6, 7, 8, 10 years.
Yes,
going through all the mental mistakes that they've made over the years, the trials and the tribulations of training, going and being injured.
Yes.
And either the different ebbs and flows of athletic competition.
Absolutely.
Now, hey, Mike. Now, is this a new mental approach?
I'm sorry.
Is there now when you're looking at this approach?
Yeah.
How does it apply to different ages? Because obviously you have masters athletes, and I know that you're working with Leslie, who's one of your quarter milers, half miler. She's pretty dynamic.
Yes.
But how would it relate to, let's say, a younger person?
Well, there's research that shows that young people can do meditation very well. they can, if they start, they have great imagination, and it's just probably changing the language a little bit. Like for a person 11 or 12, you might not use, literary language or something like that. When I've had a group of elite middle distance runners, for instance, each person is different, and you have to kind of figure out how they respond. My colleague up at Princeton, Dr. David Moreau, he's able to test participants in a group, tell which ones have the best mental clarity or mental proclivity, and then look at what skills and what imagery. And the answer to your question, Ian, is the younger you can start, the imagery that you can create, if your brain is doing something, even if you're 11 or 12 out here, it's doing something. So I'm really interested to see because what Kevin said is absolutely correct. There's every phase, there's injury phase, there's ebb and flow kind of things, there's preseason. People that run well in the preseason sometimes don't progress as much as they could, and a lot of that is because they're not phasing their mental training the way they are their physical training. So they know how to recover, they know all those different aspects.
Have you noticed that, for instance, you have I'm giving an example. You would have a high school athlete, a very, very gifted high school athlete, gets recruited by major universities in the country, go in as a freshman with all that whole transition of being, from high school to college. And they on this particular team, and they're not able to achieve the time in which they ran in high school on that collegiate level.
That's right.
What kind of transitional ideas or situations would you play that up towards?
Well, I think it's a great example, even yesterday in the Prefontaine meet, that lady that Alberto coaches, she never ran for a high school. She just started with him when she was like Kane, when she was like 13, 14, and she didn't go through that transition. In the clubs in Europe, they can start, they stay with the same focus. We only have to look as far as Alan Webb, the American record holder for high school in the mile, that once you try to go forward and you get the wrong connection, it's hard to go back and regroup. So I think staying with one coach, having a youth program, especially I think focusing on the mental aspect as well, so that you're not like a child star that then can't find your flow again. Yes.
So now, Kevin gave you the example of the high school. Now, here you've got some of the great athletes in the world. You're taking these great athletes in the world and you're asking them to run a world record time or near their world record time or their innate ability.
Yes.
What techniques are you using to push that athlete to their genetic potential? And then balance the risk of injury, because we know the closer you get to your genetic potential, the greater chances of injury. So what are you doing to push that athlete to that level? What type of technique would you use? An example.
Is that for Kevin? Or
No, that's for you, Mike.
Oh, okay.
For the doctor.
Yeah, well, we got the doctor in the hot seat. You're running the anchor leg.
Well, here's the thing. We know from like slow and fast twitch fibers the potential for physical potential, and now we're getting to know the potential for mental aspects and how to take people from a baseline to their peak performance. So the Olympic programs in the future from a lot of different countries, like for instance, one of my mentors, Lars Erik Unstål, he's been, since the 1960s, he's been the only sports psychologist in the Olympics, worked with like 30 teams, and a lot of it is confidential. Interestingly, I spoke to a good friend of mine, Dr. Patrick Devine, yesterday, who worked with John Schmaltz and a lot of the pitchers for the Braves. And he said you have to do a lot of it confidential because, like you just said today, people don't really know like what mental training is. They think maybe you need a psychiatrist or a psychologist and what's wrong with you. So So it's still in its kind of confidential stage, but we're getting to be able to not be random, because in my PhD study, there was a lot of situations where people thought they were having a great effect with mental training, and it was what they call equivocal. It wasn't really significant. So now what we're trying to do is tighten that. I have a company. It's called Integral Athletic Training Center. And we're in the process of financing. I'm going up to New York this week to set that up, and then I think we'll have a lot of research. And the thing is, the good thing about the research and working through universities is then what you do can be duplicated. So we want young people, young researchers. For instance, I had an IOC Solidarity program in 2001, and now Edgar de Oliveira, who was part of that, is now number 3 or 4 in the Olympic in their Olympic focus, and Fela Pedro, who was the former decathlon champion at the University of Oregon, has a center now in Brazil. So we want to bring people into the hot seat and learn these things and work with their athletes at the highest level of stress and competition.
Now, Mike, I heard you say something that kind of caught my attention. Mental health. Mental health in the United States, there's a lot of taboo about mental health. Obviously, not a lot of people. I was at the Olympic Training Center, and the sports psychologists were out there, and one of the things, they couldn't get anybody to come. Now, how do we demystify the mental or the taboo on mental health? Because it's still part of the mental health process when we're talking about sports psychology.
Right. Yeah. I'm teaching hopefully a class at Argosy University for training young people to become sports psychologists. And there's a strong journal where we're applying our articles to because of the research I did in Kenya. And the thing is, if people know that this is going to make a difference and you can show them with research, the coaches and the owners in some way have to have a belief. They have to work with you. They have to go to the team and go to the group. A friend of mine is the sports psychologist for Arizona, and they just won the World Series. I think last year they did with him. But the coach somehow doesn't want to give the credit so much to the sports psychologist because people think it takes away from the athlete's performance. The same was with John Schmaltz when he was with mental trainer Llewellyn, that they wanted to keep it hush because people would say, oh, without that he wouldn't have done well. So somehow the coaches and it's a shame that a sports psychologist would be at a national training center. If the coach kept on saying, I believe in this, I know this, I want you to do this, this is going to be a training part of my facet, we're going to do it, and the owner or the financier says, yes, we believe in this, that would change that. But there's a lot of politics that has to be done and information for people to accept it as something that's really critical and vital to their training.
So basically, there's too many inconsistencies in what clubs and federations or owners or GMs want out of their athletes or their members, as opposed to what they're actually telling them.
Right. Exactly, Kevin.
Now let me ask you this, Kevin, and I'm going to point this question to you. So you were preparing for the race, and when you ran the world record, did you employ sports psychology, or was it your coach?
It was a partnership because what happened along the way during those trainings and practices in which I would do a lot of things, as an athlete, you need an extra pair of eyes on you. A lot of times what you're physically doing that feels comfortable, in aspects when someone's actually looking at you, you're making all sort of physical mistakes, and your mind doesn't notice it or even play into it until it's brought to its attention. I think in my case what happened was I had to actually weed out a lot of the things inconsistencies of things in which I thought were correct that turned out were detrimental to the way in which I was running. I'll give an example. First of all, athletes had to get out of their mind that they shouldn't want to be like the next or be like that next great athlete. One thing it was, I'm not Edwin Moses. I don't want to run like Edwin Moses. I don't want to train like Edwin Moses. I want to be successful in the 400-meter hurdle. So I had to eliminate Mr. Moses out of my whole focal point and see what Kevin Young can do possibly to run faster, and then eliminate all the conditions in which I had been doing leading up to the point where I wasn't as successful as I would like to be, to clean out and iron out my race. Going back to the one thing that I needed to do was basically my approach to the race itself. I remember running, not utilizing the adrenaline that I had in the beginning of the race, and by the time I got to the backside of the race, it went from adrenaline to lactic acid. And that's a key thing, because you see how if athletes were able to manage their adrenaline getting out in their race and try to manage it accordingly through the course of the race, they will be a lot successful athletes and run a lot faster. And to be honest with you, that is one of the biggest examples, because you know, as a coach, you look at athletes, you say, well, if you not that you back off in the first portion of the race, but if you manage and maintain and don't exert yourself as much and utilize that energy on the back end coming home, you'll be able to run a lot faster, which at the end of the day, because as a coach, you want your athlete to do what, or not to do, is say, oh, I had a whole lot in my tank. I could have ran a lot faster. I would much rather see an athlete fall flat on their face, knowing that they gave it their all, than the course. That way, I know I can work with them and have a measuring stick. I can measure the efforts of an athlete if they constantly, consistently tell me that, oh, I could have ran faster at the end of the race, once the race is over with. You know, so there's a lot of mental things that you have to look out and weed out and focus in on, and make it very simple, because a lot of times we bring a lot of things into our mentality. We basically make some that's A, B, and C. We make it the Pythagorean theorem. We make it. We add the square to it, the plus signs and equals, and we really jack it up when it's as simple as taking one step and put in front of the next.
Yeah, Kevin is really correct, because the working with the arousal for your activity and really being able to center and know internally what that arousal is when you're in the block. Keep on practicing what arousal level you want to bring to it. That can be a practice that you could do, so that when you're going from adrenaline to lactic acid, you're practicing that in your mind. So the connection between your brain and that can be trained outside of the running, and that's exactly what Kevin was saying.
So, Mike, here you go. This is lightning in a bottle. This is going to make the rubber between the road, because this is what all coaches try to achieve and get and convey to their athletes.
Yes.
What can they do at that point? There's a point where you say, I am at my physical limit. This is where the mental toughness, as most people call it.
Right.
But what is it that we as a coach can work on once we work with our athletes and get them past that point where it is now a challenge physically and it's playing on their mental psyche?
Yes. Well, I mean, the coach knows the athlete better than anyone. They know the ins and outs. They're with them every day. They need to be a partner with the mental training person who has the data and the background and the research. And in that way, we're going to be able to find where those connections are. So I think, people need to hear more, like from athletes like Kevin, world record holders, how even there's different aspects they could have improved on there. And their recognition. I think what you're talking about, Ian, is the recognition of the areas where you need improvement. And
what I'm really thinking about is the threshold, that physical threshold. So when Kevin is running his race, Kevin, you were 13 steps in between. You had that mapped out. Every step that you were going to take, you were going to maximize your physical effort, obviously, and you're based on who you were, based on the race, the pattern that you established with your coach. But there's a point in the race. There's a point in the race when you have the maximum lactic buildup. You have the pressure of the crowd. You have that negative talk is trying to seep in.
Oh yeah, that happened to me in Barcelona. I was walking on the track, and it was 1988, and I kept thinking of taking fourth place within coming out of the tunnel onto the infield, and I literally had to tell myself, no, this is 1992. You've been beating up on these guys all season. I mean, I literally had to tell myself, you've been beating up on Winthrop and Sam all season. You know, you got a game plan, and just stick to it. You've been very consistent. And I think what happens is we have a tendency to not not trust our own consistent judgment in which we've gotten there along with our coach. We wait to the 11th hour to switch things up at the last second, thinking it's a gut feeling, but that gut feeling may be totally but it's going against the grain of the consistency that we've been able to develop with that coach, with that psychologist.
So you've gotten to that point. So this is where you make your bread and butter, Mike. This is where the audience is listening to you and will take this information and convey it to their team. This is like the secret potion.
Is the great thing of like the Esalen Sports Center when we analyze so many great athletes and race car drivers and everything like that. And Kevin's ability to recognize what was in his mind and change it is part of his strength of being an Olympic champion and world record holder. That's an ability that a younger person can learn. They can learn to do that. Kevin, when you start to talk to him, a lot of the stuff he does automatically because that's what made him a world champion. And that's such a good example. All he was training to be the gold medalist, at the moment he's walking to the track, doubt comes in. And he's thinking, oh, maybe I can take fourth. But he was able to change his mind, become centered, see that this was only his mind working against him. I mean, our mind has that little, idiot that's trying to take us back all the time. And we have to keep on, as your phase is going to seeing ourselves on the podium, seeing ourselves doing as best we can.
Yes. Coach, Dr. Mike, I remember training at UCLA, being in Drake Stadium and walking, doing a repeat 200s coming out of the blocks, running the back first 5 hurdles, and then exhausting myself, and then literally walking back to the blocks in my little 6 to 8 minute or 3 to 5 minute rest phase, and literally waving into the empty bleachers in Drake Stadium, looking like the crazy madman doing the whole public wave and just smiling to the crowd, and I'm literally going.
Yes.
I can hear the cheers. I was actually creating the cheers of the crowd.
Yes.
And it did 2 things for me. The first thing it did was it took my mind off the fatigue state that I just put myself in.
Yes.
And it took me to my happy place.
Oh, wonderful.
in which I wanted to be. And it was literally a jovial moment because my teammates were laughing at me, making fun of me. But in all that, I kept telling them, you guys don't see the crowd cheering for me?
Wow.
You don't see them? And I'm waving back at them. Look, and I'm pointing out people in the bleachers that don't exist, right? My imaginary friends that are cheering me on.
So now, was that a cumulative effect? Was that part of, in other words, we map out everything about the race. You know every step, every point that you're going to exhale. You know that, and in that preparation, is that part? In that preparation of you waving at the imaginary crowd, was that part of your preparation?
It was.
And can
absolutely.
I take that?
Reason why it was because I saw the opposite effect of it. I saw myself literally. I've been in a race with a hamstring injury, a would-be hamstring injury, and I felt it. Leg knotted up, trying to run, trying to extend and stride in a race, finishing the race. And the muscle literally opens up, and it wasn't an injury there. But prior to that, I had doctors, chiropractors, therapists rubbing that leg, and I stressed out. I stressed out. As soon as I finished that race in Seoul, South Korea, taking 4th place, getting the pat on the back, the muscle spasm went away. It was the weirdest thing, and that was like the wake up call. And then I said, okay, at that point on, whenever I have any kind of physical ailments like that, I had to share it with somebody because I couldn't keep that bottled up and keep telling myself that. I wanted someone to acknowledge, okay, you actually do have a soreness of the hamstring. You have some sort of ailment that is hampering you for doing training the proper way. And a lot of, like I said, we have this attitude in which we can't speak to people about what may be wrong or our particular concerns. And I think that is to the detriment of our own athletic abilities. Like you said, Ian, pushing that limit.
Yeah.
Knowing what those limits are. A lot of times we don't even engage ourselves to even find out if we even have a limit or not.
Now, Mike.
That's a great example. These examples are just blowing me away.
Now, Mike, can
yes.
you... So now, here you go. You said that we can literally create this plan that goes right down, or it's parallel with the physiological plan.
Yeah.
Now let's move it back or scale it down to our young athletes. We've got a lot of 8-year-olds, 10-year-olds, 12-year-olds, 14-year-olds in the channel.
Yes.
Obviously, their concentration levels aren't the same as an adult who's preparing to run the gold record, gold medal,
Yes.
Win a gold medal. So take me through an 8-year-old or a 10-year-old and that same process and dumbing that down.
I think Kevin's example was so wonderful. Is we have the image in our mind, the prototype of the great coach and the great athlete together, and I think that happened in history. Maybe not as much as we think. The whole idea between people is the sharing of intimacy and getting away from just making broad statements. Okay, so I really think the idea is for coaches to really begin to youth development and to see the young people and try to become this intimate kind of person. So when the kid's 13, 14, 15, they're having a balanced dialogue. You know, I think Alberto Salazar would be a good person to talk to. What has he done with this young high school girl, keeping her, not having her go to the regular school? What is the language that he used in that dialogue? He's done something correct that we miss. There's a lot of talent in young people, and a lot of them don't have the intimacy with a coach that can follow them for 6 and 7 years. And, you know, I don't know, it'd be good to trace Kevin's coaches. Like, which coach was he the most close to? Sometimes that youth coach, that teenage coach, is the person you really, that found you. That, you know, I'm sure, like every world-class athlete, one time somebody saw him and said, "Holy God, I've never seen anything like that before."
Ian, I got a quick question for you.
Okay.
Because I know of a particular athlete that you've coached in the past from last year. The young lady, the young high jumper. I remember you got introduced to her to give her some instruction on high jump. And I just want to ask you two things. What was her mental capacity when you first got introduced to her about her being an effective high jumper? And what did you do to prepare her to lead her into believing that she was indeed a good high jumper, and then for her to actually go out there and prove that she was a good high jumper, you know, becoming an All-American?
Okay. Well, first thing, Kev, is I believe in testing. I got to know the strengths and weaknesses of any athlete that I work with personally. So the only way that I isolate their strengths and weaknesses outside the field of play is typically giving them a series of different tests to see how explosive, how reactive, and then literally on the mental side, one day in practice I may be a little tough on them. The other day I may be very communicative with them just to see how well they respond. So with this particular athlete, what it was is right away I could tell there was a whole set of self-confidence issues that I identified pretty quickly based on just some of the interactions that we had. So with that, my focus was to make her feel that she was the best athlete in the world. From the time that she walked on the track, it's all about being a champion. So it's about walking tall and sending the message to your competitors that you're jumping for second, you're jumping for third. So that was a lot of, you know, stop, turn around, look me in the eye, walk tall, shoulders back, and I call it the West Point walk. In other words, I take that model that they teach in the armed services where they work on lifting or making the soldier walk tall, shoulders back, head up in a neutral position, which is the optimal position physiologically. So I said, let's start with that. And I said, go through, I set a warm-up procedure for her, so she had a fixed warm-up procedure. So I got her away from this loose procedure. Then the last thing I did was I forced her to come right under her PR. So she wasn't jumping a lot. This kid always wanted to come in and be part of everybody else. You know, kids, from my perspective, always want to fit in. And I said, you can't fit in because you're competing for the same thing. And physiologically, if you're taking 10 jumps, you're shot by the time you get to the bar. So we worked on her coming in, and it was a struggle. That was probably the hardest struggle I had with her, convincing her she's a 5'6" high jumper, that you come in at 5'2" instead of 4'2" and jump all those progressions. And I said, and if you're going to do those progressions, I said, let's send a message to your competitors. Keep your sweats on and go over there and do a scissors kick over the bar and go sit down. And so send the message that you're here to play. So now you put the pressure not on yourself, you're putting it on your competitors. So that's what I tried to do with her last year.
Did you? What kind of feedback did you get from her parents?
Her parents were really receptive, because one of the things is I looked at it as a team dynamic, because they spend more time with her than I do. So what it is, I called them up and I said, listen, make her walk tall, make her be a leader, make her out front, make her feel like she's the greatest person on this earth. Focus on her. Put the focus on her. Focus for the next 90 days. And so what we did is I worked with her parents collaboratively, getting them to focus on her, not just with extrinsic things, but intrinsically. You know, so lead the prayer at home. You know, things of that nature. Just simple, small things like that. Make her work through her challenges. Don't be quick to come to her rescue. So that's what I really.
I mean, because I remember
That's
seeing
good.
her early in the season, and then when I went to the girls' state meet down in Albany, it was like night and day. She did all the things you described, keeping the sweats on, waiting until they raised the bar, didn't come in at a lower height, keeping her cool. It was so funny hearing her peers say, "I remember last year." She didn't know how to jump X amount of feet. And then you had young ladies who were her competitors. Oh, I wouldn't say her competitors. She wouldn't compete against them because they were just blowing her out of the water. They were sitting back huddled up in a corner, like just chattering, like what has happened? And obviously I could see the look in the eyes of the parents. They was like, oh boy.
Exactly.
Well,
Exactly.
You know, the thing has been going through my mind too, and they showed it on the pre-meet yesterday again. The Russian high jumper who lost his number early in the jumps, and then went on to win the gold medal. And I did my research on distractive imagery, and it was exactly what we found in our research, is that if you're distracted from something, sometimes your mind allows that what it has to do to catch up, it relaxes you and lets you, say, oh God, he could have got eliminated from the jumping if he didn't find a shirt to wear. So I think there's a lot of things that go on that you have to prepare even the young athlete. Look, we're visualizing this exactly correctly. You're coming into the stadium, you're doing the perfect warm-up, you're there. But you have to be ready to be flexible also. And when something happens, be able to center yourself. Can you imagine the minute he was looking through his bag, he couldn't find a shirt? And,
freaking out.
And
I mean, it happens to athletes all the time. One of the things, when I became an elite athlete, the two things they say you should never pack on your international flight. Don't pack your spikes underneath the cabin, or your uniform, a clean uniform and underwear. So I would take my spikes, take my singlet, because you can always get a pair of funky shorts. But I would take my singlet that I would wear with the team logo on it, roll those up, stuff them in my spikes, and put that in my carry-on. Because the worst thing can happen is once you got to a track meet or to a country and your bag didn't make it.
Exactly.
And you're going from the airport to the hotel to the practice track, back to the hotel to compete the following evening. And you're sitting back asking teammates, Danny doesn't wear a size 11.5. He's a 9.5. Steve's a 10.5.
Oh, what stress that?
And no one has an extra uniform, and you're a club team, and like you just said, you're just distracted.
Yeah.
And hadn't even started the race yet.
Right.
Hadn't even got your passport stamped, and you're freaking out. And I tell young athletes all the time, pack your uniform, hold on to your uniform, wear it if you have to.
Yeah.
If you're running spikes, always carry them with you on the plane.
I had an example like that at the Penn Relays. The Kenyans have a thing where somebody holds your shoes for you while you're warming up, and the guy that had my anchorman's shoes, we couldn't find him.
He couldn't try to get into it.
He couldn't find him. And I looked down, and Sammy, my anchorman, was pointing to his feet. He was going to have to run barefoot. And then 2 minutes before we went out to we found the guy, and he had the spikes in his bag.
Well, guys, we're going to take a break here, and we're here with Mike Spino and Kevin Young and Ian Dubé.
Dr. Mike Spino.
This is Dr. Mike Spino. So we'll be back, fans. Talk to you soon.
Bags by Coach O is proud to announce that we now carry a full line of track and field equipment. We are working in conjunction with MF Athletics. Go to our website and view our new Puma catalog at www.coacho.com.
We are back, and I have the privilege to have Dr. Gus Smith, Dr. Mike Spino, and, of course, yours truly, Kevin Young, world record holder and Olympic gold medalist from Barcelona, and myself, Ian Dubé. This is a privilege to be able to hit the psychotherapist here. We've got a psychiatrist.
Wait, you got to give the background behind this. We're sitting here talking earlier with Dr. Spino about psychoanalysis and sports psychology
and things of that nature.
We're actually watching a fellow athlete compete on the track, not knowing, unknowingly to us, he's a psychologist.
I think he's Jamaican because
he's a psychologist.
Psychiatrist.
He's a psychiatrist.
This guy's a psychiatrist. He's a
the full.
guy.
He's the
full.
The MD.
The full.
So, the beautiful part about it is that he's Jamaican, I think, because he's a psychiatrist during the day, a coach during the evening, an athlete during the night, a parent, father, husband, brother, sister at night. I mean, how many jobs do you have?
I'm always doing something.
Always doing something.
It's a full house.
Something. And earlier today we were having a discussion, Mike, and you probably want to kind of roll into what you're doing. And I've always asked this question. Before we start, I want to know, jumping is one of the most, how long have human beings been jumping? Where in the brain controls the mechanism of jumping?
Yes, that's a discussion that Ian and I have been having, and I'm going to see my colleague at Princeton on Friday, actually, who's doing work on the brain and sports and where emanates the mental capacity. But I'm privileged to be here with you, Doctor, and hear your kind of thoughts on it. I have an organization that does mental training with different countries and different groups, and we're trying to formulate a program that is very specific to letting the group know that that they'll improve by doing mental training at the same time as physical training through their season. So I'd love to hear your insights into the mental side of sports and performance.
Well, I'm a psychiatrist by day with medical background, medical school. You deliver all your babies, do the surgery, and then you specialize in the psychiatry. These days, most of psychiatry, as you know, is sort of in the Prozac camp. I'm not one of those. I'm in the thinking and talking and still do my own psychotherapy and all. And what I liken it to, both on the field and off, is I'm a little on a wind. I just finished a race myself. Mind obeys a lot of laws of physics. The ball will roll downhill if there's nothing to impede it, but to go uphill, it's got to have motivation. And so in my psychotherapy practice, I help people figure out what's their motivation behind them, but more often what's their inhibition in front of them.
Yeah, we're discussing earlier about in sports, and an event in which or a profession in which the athlete who's in one of the most stressful situations ever. Why is it such a taboo for professional athletes or athletes to talk about whatever kind of mental ailments or the mentality of being a participant in the sport or the stresses of being an athlete overall, training, conditioning, preparing themselves, and even going out there and running or whatever particular sport they may have to do? Why is it such a taboo for them to even discuss that if they happen to be talking to some sort of psychiatrist or psychologist about improving themselves in that particular sport?
Yeah, in my practice, I liken it to the American love of football and the linemen, that everything is just push forward, dig in as hard as you can. They just had to call me back for a start because I was using a football stance over there. I don't know if you saw that. Yeah. But we think of it as just push ahead, show no weakness, don't show any variance, just push. And you really can't analyze your own movements until you are willing to say, something I can do better. The other day I taped myself and saw my start was not so great, but I had to spend 24 hours feeling humble after that. And a lot of athletes just don't want to feel that way. Doctor?
Well, what you're saying is I'm listening, and I see that you're on the same track. A lot of these, like what Kevin was saying, even some of these large teams, they may accept the mental training aspect, but they want to do it confidentially because the perception is that they have something wrong with them rather than they're improving their performance through imagery and peak performance thinking. So it's amazing what Kevin was saying before about especially how in his practice when he was really tired, it waved like he was waving to the crowd. And event rehearsal, in fact, event rehearsal is my specialty. And, that's what I'm hearing from you as well, of what you're putting from your intellectual psyche into the sport that you love, and if you can take that and distill it, it can be a real help to all the all the other young people that are trying to do this. And that's kind of the task that I have right now, is trying to create these kind of curriculums. I know Ian is very into how it relates to young people, so I'd love to get more of your wisdom. I mean, it's amazing being here with both of you.
Now let me ask you this, Dr. Gus. We were talking about the 400 meters earlier. You ran the 400 meters today.
I ran the 400-meter hurdles.
You ran the 400-meter hurdles. Okay, so...
The hard race.
There's very few races I don't think are hard.
Yeah.
They're all relative. But we were sitting here discussing the psychology of going into a race. So we know that there's, in the 400 meters or any oval race, you have certain arousal levels, and they change during the race because we know there's an inverse relationship between concentration and arousal. A 400-meter hurdle race has a lot of concentration in it because you have a fixed step pattern. All right, so neurologically, typically we ingrain that pattern into the race, and we have a plan. We want to take 13 steps or 20 steps or whatever we want to do. So what we were discussing earlier is, at a certain point, your body's going to tell you, I've had it. I've given you everything. Now, we were talking about what is, as a coach, all right? Coaches aren't scientists and scientists aren't coaches. As a coach, what can I do from the psychological aspect to push my athlete from the high lactic acid buildup, or the gorilla, as many of us call it, the piano, whatever adjective we want to throw at it? How can we get them to the finish line in the most efficient way and keep them in that zone?
Well, that's probably one. I would go back to what the other doctor was saying, was the event rehearsal. It's just rehearse. You do the hurdles over and over and over and over. And even under ideal circumstances, any Olympian can tell you, you don't always keep that same stride pattern the whole way.
We had discussed it in the course of my race, me and Dr. Spino, was the fact that I had a game plan going in, but I knew that at any given time, with the high stress level of being in that predicament in that Olympic final, that at any split second decision that I would make could change the outcome of me placing in the top three in that race, or even clipping a hurdle and falling. But the only thing I rest assured upon was the fact that I knew my stride pattern, I knew how I wanted to feel during the course of the race, and I really didn't want to bring into the race any outside disturbance that I wasn't keying in on. And I figured if I stayed in control with that, then I would have been able to pretty much finish the race. I didn't have my mind on any kind of world record or anything, but I knew what I was comfortable with and what I trained for, and I knew what I can pretty much get away with. If anybody was going to make a mistake in that race, I felt that it was going to be my competitors, not myself, if I didn't deviate from my game plan. And it seemed that was the case after looking at the race itself. The good thing is I was able to set a world record, but two things I had on my: finishing the race in the top three. That's all. That's all I wanted to do, and I had a game plan leading up to that. But prior to that was, I guess, the mental gymnastics in which I prepared myself before getting in that situation. I knew it was just such a high profile situation to be in, and I knew I needed every and any kind of avenue to relieve that stress and to kind of literally take the crowd out of the picture. What sort of advice would you have for younger athletes? Because first of all, let me get to the point. It took me 4 years from 1988 until 1992 to figure all this stuff out.
Yeah.
When you talk with Dr. Mike, we need to be able to teach our youngsters that a lot earlier, so it won't take them a 4-year, 5-year, 6-year plan for them to figure out how to hone in all their aspects of their race and put it all together.
Yeah, well, unfortunately, that is kind of a truth that we know in sports, that it can take 1,000 repetitions to work something into that brain neural circuitry that Dr. Spinell is working on. So it doesn't surprise me, and that the better you get, sometimes the less steep that learning curve is. It's not as steep a slope of effort, but it's a slow slope in getting it through your head. As far as relaxing, I think the best quote I've heard recently was Aries Merritt, who has the world record in the 110 high hurdles. I ran into him the other day and asked him, how does he focus on that intensely fast race where everything matters down to the 100th of a second? And he just looked at me calmly, didn't even miss a heartbeat, and said, I treat every race like it's practice.
Yes.
I just walk out there and do exactly what I've been doing, which I find the hard thing for me is to balance all those practices where I know I have my best times and balance it with the nerves when I get out to competition like this today. But as far as coming into the 400-meter races you were talking about a moment ago, the language you use tells us how tough it is that the gorilla jumps on you. You used the term piano. In my day, it was the bear jumped on your back.
It hasn't changed.
And we also use the term you hit the wall.
The wall.
And as I was saying earlier, I think the biggest thing for us to train anybody with a curve run, especially the 400